run a little bit. It's really, really hot outside and humid, right? I come back home and I see this glass of water. And I want to hold this glass of water and drink it, right? So you'll tell me, guys, what sensory receptors, which sensory receptors worked here? Raise your hand, if you will, and think about it. Okay, which type of sensory receptors acted here? There's never, ever, either a bonus or a penalty for a good or wrong, for the correct or wrong answer. What you do need is to try. So feel free, please. Yeah. The peripheral, all the sensory, it's a good answer, but all the sensory receptors will be in the peripheral nervous system. I'm asking specifically about which type. What do you think? We didn't learn about this, if anyone knows. Eyes, wonderful. In our eyes, we have photoreceptors, famous rods and cones, right? So I can see, in order for me to drink water, I need to see that there's a glass of water, right? Otherwise, I would not, maybe I want to drink, but I cannot drink because I don't see that. So photoreceptors tell my central nervous system, dude, there's a glass of water here. What else? What are the photoreceptors? Maria? Taste, or maybe before taste? Well, if we drink it, it will be taste. I agree with that. Once we grab it, but even before we grab it, what else? Thirst, right? I said we're thirsty. How does my brain know that I'm thirsty? Someone needs to tell the brain, we don't have enough water. And these are not going to be external receptors that get information from the outside world, but actually receptors in our blood. Chemoreceptor, receptors that can give us information about the concentration of solutes, and as a result, the brain is going to translate it into lack of water. So we tell the brain, we are thirsty. And the combination of that, the fact that I'm thirsty on one hand and that I see and maybe even taste or smell, if it's not water, something that I can smell, right, basically tell me, okay, I need to drink. So the central nervous system, the information will go from the sensory receptors through sensory input into the central nervous system. In some cases, it will not involve the spinal cord. It will go directly to the brain. For example, our photoreceptors do not interact with the spinal cord. That will go directly to the brain. In other cases, it will go to the spinal cord and stay there, the famous spinal reflexes. And in many cases, it will involve both the spinal cord and the central nervous system. But whatever we do, we're going to have a lot of signaling inside the central nervous system between different neurons, many synapses over there, that will allow our central nervous system to make a decision. Thirsty, see a cup of water, let's hold this cup of water and drink. But the brain cannot reach out, right, to the cup of water. For that, we have the peripheral nervous system again, for the output. And we call output, in human physiology, we call it motor output physiology, not just human. So we have a sensory input and a motor output. And in this case, the motor output will go to different effectors. Effectors will be organs, tissues, or cells that are going to do the job, basically. They're getting commands from the CEO, this is the brain, and as a result, now they are performing those commands. They are the soldiers in that movie that I told you about. And in this case, for example, the biceps will, after we grab, we need first to grab, the bicep will contract so we can actually drink. Of course, it's not just the biceps, we need to control our jaw muscles, we need to do a lot of things in order to drink that water. But it's not just to grab and to contract or not. It's also about how tightly should I contract it to hold the glass, right? If I hold the glass too tightly, then it's going to break. If it's too loose, it's also going to break. So the central nervous system and the muscles in this case need to discuss things in a way that will allow us to tell the muscles not only to do something or not to do something, but also to grade that response. Hold it tightly, but not too tight, but not too loose, right? So in the class, during the semester, we will learn how we can grade those responses, how we're not just saying muscle contract, but also muscle contract, but not too much, or muscle contract, and please add more force into it. That's the basic neural circuit. Questions? I always find it interesting that when we start with the big picture, they're kind of like straightforward questions, right? It's pretty simple. You look at that and you're saying, okay, that's not a big deal. Interestingly enough, in the exams, when I ask questions about the big picture, that's where the students are confused. So just make sure you get the big picture. Yes?
Is motor output always done by the peripheral?
Motor output will be executed by the peripheral system, yes. Yep.
So does it only go, like, I guess, is the input only possible from sensor receptors, like, tactilely, or would it be possible that, like, say, you don't realize that you're thirsty because your mouth is dry, but, like,
You won't realize, but there are sensory receptors that will tell you. So this is when we talk about realize, know or not know, but it doesn't matter. There will be sensory receptors that actually act them.
right?
You're not familiar right now. You cannot tell me what your pH in the blood is. You cannot tell me about your blood pressure, right? Your brain gets input right now about your blood pressure. So the brain can make decisions and adjust, reaching homeostasis of the blood pressure.
So, but, like, that realization, or whether conscious or unconscious, that still is part of the PNS?
Exactly. Consciousness or not, it's always going to go this circuit.
Okay.
What happens when you hold it too tight? You made the wrong decision. Basically, the output is wrong, and as a result, we'll adjust. We'll do a better choice next time. That's how we learn. And we'll talk about learning. Okay. If we focus on the peripheral nervous system, I mentioned that we like to classify things, so let's classify even more. Okay? So central nervous system and peripheral nervous system talk with each other. I mentioned sensory and motor. We also like to call sensory, we give them a different name. We call it afferent and efferent. So the sensory neurons are responsible for the afferent input, or we call them just afferent neurons. This is again part of the peripheral. Now we only talk peripheral nervous system. While the motor output is also known as the efferent. Easy way to remember this is that the efferent provides an effect. It's going to effectors. It creates an effect. I'll use it interchangeably. Just know that we have those two terms. We're going to further divide them, each into two parts. We'll start with the sensory. We divide the sensory based on the location where we receive the information. We're going to divide it into somatic and visceral. Somatic comes from the word soma. Anyone knows what soma is? Body, great. These are signals that come and are getting the input at the periphery of our body, mainly the skin. We have lots and lots and lots of types of receptors, sensory receptors in our skin. I just touched the podium. Sensory receptors on the tips of my fingers send signals through sensory or afferent neurons, but specifically from somatic afferent neurons, into my spinal cord, and from there it followed tracts into the brain, so we can make decisions, and now I know I touched the podium. It's not just the skin. In our scalp, typically mainly in the tendons and in the muscles, we also have other receptors. We call them proprioceptors, but we'll talk about them in more details when we talk about sensation, that give us also a sense mainly of stretch. Okay? These are all somatic because they come from the periphery of us. Internal signals are viscerals. Viscera, internal. So internal organs. Okay? I mentioned the pH fact, for example, that will come from chemoreceptors inside my body, internal receptors. We also divide the motor into two parts, and that can be a bit confusing because it sounds similar, but they're not similar. The first part is actually very similar, and these are the somatic. Why that can be confusing? Because we do not divide the motor, we do not define the motor outputs divisions by location. We divide them based on the effectors, on the targets that they intervene. Intervene, reach out to, and control. So it's a somatic motor neuron. If it intervenes synapses with and stimulates, if needed, skeletal muscles. Okay, I touch the podium, and as a result, I want to change. I want to contract my biceps. I don't want to touch the podium anymore. So I'm now sending a motor output that is going to be somatic to my biceps, because biceps is a skeletal muscle, and boom. That's it. That's the output. The second group of motor neurons or efferent neurons are going to be the autonomic. They are not going to reach or control the skeletal muscles. They're going to control smooth muscles, for example, our blood vessels, the walls of our blood vessels, cardiac muscles. What is the cardiac? Heart, as well as glands. Glands are either cells or groups of cells that know how to synthesize and secrete different molecules. For example, hormones, not only. These are all autonomic. I want to give you a minute to think about it together, maybe. When I say together, I mean with each other. I said that this is based on function, but not based on, or not function, but based on the identity of the target, right? Not based on location. But hey, skeletal muscles are almost always on the periphery, right? And think about autonomic blood vessels inside, cardiac heart inside. So can you try to think about one example where the somatic goes to skeletal muscles that are not in the periphery. Others will think about an example of an autonomic one that doesn't go to the internal. Because again, it's not about location in the motor. It's about the target. I'm looking for one that shows you that autonomic can reach a non-visceral, a non-internal target, or somatic can reach something internal. Think about between yourselves. What do you think? Okay. Any ideas? So first of all, we have blood vessels in the periphery. However, although you're right, we still think about the blood vessels as being internal, even if they are close to the periphery. But you're right, first of all. But anything else? Yeah. Sweat glands is a great example, right? Glands, autonomic, right? We all know Carolina in the summer. We all know what sweat is, right? The glands are really embedded inside your skin, in your skin. Anyone can give me a different example for somatic, the target skeletal muscle, but it's in your internal? Anyone who knows? Tongue, I'm not sure we can call it internal. It's a good question. It's a skeletal muscle, by the way, but you're right. Okay, and any other example? The muscle in the spinal cord, again, still will be close to the periphery. I'm talking really internal, yes. That control blood, these will be smooth muscles, actually. So these are internal. Diaphragm, exactly. Breathe in. Breathe in. Breathe out. We just use a skeletal muscle. Diaphragm, totally inside, it's internal, it's a viscera, but it's actually a skeletal muscle. We control it through our somatic motor neurons. Okay? On Thursday, we'll start with our first learning catalytics. We'll talk about that, and we will continue with the cell of the nervous system.